this is acceptable. You have single-handedly ruined this evening with your antics. Look at the mess you've made.
Imagine standing in a room full of millionaires and power players, wearing your most elegant dress, when suddenly a glass of red wine comes flying at you, deliberately. The room falls silent. Everyone is watching. And the person who threw it? A billionaire who thinks you're the help. But here's what he didn't know. The woman he just humiliated in front of everyone, she wasn't serving at that gala. She was hosting it. She didn't work for the empire he was bragging about. She owned it. What happened next would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Because sometimes the universe has a way of delivering justice in the most devastating, unforgettable ways.
Her name was Michaela Grant, and on paper, she had everything. At 34, she was the CEO of Grant Hospitality Group, one of the most successful luxury hotel and event management empires in the country. Forbes had called her the Quiet Titan. Business Insider wrote a feature titled, "The Woman Who Redefined Elegance in Hospitality." She'd built her company from the ground up, starting with a single boutique hotel she renovated with her own savings and a bank loan she fought tooth and nail to secure. But none of that mattered when people looked at her and only saw one thing. Michaela had learned early that being a black woman in elite spaces meant constantly proving yourself. It meant walking into boardrooms and being mistaken for the assistant. It meant attending investor meetings and having men talk over her, only to repeat her ideas 5 minutes later and get the credit. It meant smiling through microaggressions, biting her tongue during racist jokes, and working twice as hard for half the recognition. Still, she'd built something undeniable. Grant Hospitality wasn't just successful, it was exceptional. Her properties were known for impeccable service, breathtaking design, and an atmosphere that made guests feel like royalty. She employed hundreds of people, many of them women and people of color she'd intentionally hired and mentored. She had proven herself 1,000 times over. And yet, there were still rooms she walked into where she felt invisible, or worse, unwelcome. Tonight was supposed to be different. The annual Founders and Innovators Gala was the event of the season. A glittering affair held at the Sterling Hall, one of the most historic and prestigious venues in the city. It was a place where old money met new money, where deals were made over champagne, and where the city's most powerful people gathered to see and be seen. This year, Michaela wasn't just attending. She was one of the honorees. She'd been invited to receive the Emerging Visionary Award for her contributions to the hospitality industry and her philanthropic work supporting Black-owned businesses. She'd built her company from the ground up, starting with a single boutique hotel she renovated with her own savings and a bank loan she fought tooth and nail to secure. But none of that mattered when people looked at her and only saw one thing. Richard Caldwell III. He stood near the bar, surrounded by a small circle of admirers, laughing loudly at something someone had said. In his 70s, with silver hair swept back and a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars, he was old money personified. His family had built their fortune in steel and manufacturing decades ago, and though the industries had changed, the wealth had only grown. He was a fixture at events like this, arrogant, entitled, and utterly convinced of his superiority. Michaela had heard stories about him. Everyone had. He was known for being ruthless in business and dismissive of anyone he considered beneath him. He had a reputation for making cutting remarks disguised as jokes, for treating service workers like they were invisible, for wielding his wealth and status like a weapon. She'd never interacted with him directly, and she hoped to keep it that way. But fate had other plans.
Michaela was standing near the edge of the main hall, speaking with a colleague from another hospitality firm, when she felt a presence beside her. She turned and found herself face to face with Richard Caldwell. Up close, he was even more imposing, not because of his height, but because of the cold arrogance in his eyes. He looked at her the way someone might glance at an obstruction in their path, a minor inconvenience to be dealt with. "Excuse me," he said, his tone clipped. "I need another scotch, neat." Michaela blinked. For a second, she didn't understand. Then it hit her. He thought she was a server. She felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, that cocktail of disbelief, anger, and exhaustion that came with moments like this. How many times has she been in spaces like this, dressed impeccably, standing confidently, and still been reduced to someone whose only purpose was to serve? She kept her composure. "I'm not a server," she said calmly. "I'm a guest." Richard didn't apologize. He didn't even look embarrassed. He just raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting from annoyance to something worse, amusement. "A guest," he repeated, glancing at her outfit as if trying to reconcile her appearance with his assumption. "Well, then perhaps you could find someone who can get me a drink. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Michaela felt the eyes of nearby guests beginning to turn their way. Her colleague beside her shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure you can find a server yourself," Michaela said, her voice steady but firm. "If you'll excuse me." She turned to walk away, but Richard wasn't done. "Wait a minute," he called after her, loud enough that more heads turned. "What's your name? Who are you here with?" Michaela stopped. She didn't want to engage, but something about the way he said it, "Who are you here with?" as if she couldn't possibly be there on her own merit, as if she needed a white escort to validate her presence, made her blood boil. She turned back to face him. "My name is Michaela Grant," she said clearly. "I'm here because I'm receiving an award tonight. I own Grant Hospitality Group." For a split second, she saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. But it was quickly replaced by a smug smile. "Grant Hospitality," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "Never heard of it." The people around them had gone quiet now, watching the exchange. Michaela could feel their stares, some curious, some uncomfortable, some eager to see what would happen next. "That's unfortunate," Michaela said coolly. "We've been quite successful." Richard laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that dripped with disdain. "Successful," he gestured around the room. "Sweetheart, this is success. Old families, old money, old traditions. People like you—" He paused, his eyes raking over her with barely concealed contempt. "You come into our world, you throw around words like CEO and empire, but at the end of the day, you're just new." The word hung in the air like poison. New. It wasn't just about her company. It was about her blackness, her audacity to exist in a space he believed belonged to people like him. Michaela felt her hands trembling slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "I think you should watch what you say." Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping to a mock whisper, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or what? You'll report me." He laughed again. "Darling, I've been coming to this gala for 40 years. My family funded the foundation that hosts it. You think anyone here cares about your little feelings?" That's when things escalated. One of the servers, a young black woman carrying a tray of wine glasses, walked past at that exact moment. Richard, still staring at Michaela with that smug, superior smile, reached out without warning, and plucked a glass of red wine from the tray. And then, in one swift, deliberate motion, he threw it. The wine hit Michaela's dress like a splash of blood. The emerald green fabric soaked it up instantly, the deep red stain spreading across her chest and stomach. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The server froze, horrified. Michaela stood there, dripping, stunned. Richard set the empty glass down on a nearby table, brushed his hands together as if cleaning them, and smiled. "Oops," he said. "How clumsy of me. Maybe you should go clean yourself up. There's a restroom down the hall. I'm sure you know where the help goes." The room was silent. Dozens of people had witnessed what just happened, and not one of them said a word. Michaela looked down at her ruined dress, then back at Richard. Her heart was pounding, her vision blurred with rage and humiliation. Every instinct told her to scream, to lash out, to make him feel even a fraction of the degradation he just inflicted on her. But she didn't. Because Michaela Grant didn't just survive in rooms like this, she won in them. She straightened her shoulders, met Richard's eyes, and spoke in a voice so calm, so controlled, it cut through the silence like a blade. "You should watch what you say." Richard smirked. "And why is that?" Michaela didn't answer. She simply turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her head held high, despite the wine dripping down her dress. Behind her, whispers began to spread. Phones came out, cameras captured the aftermath. And somewhere in that crowd, someone who knew exactly who Michaela Grant was started to realize Richard Caldwell had just made the biggest mistake of his life.
Michaela made it to the hallway before her composure finally cracked. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of a marble console table, the wine still wet and sticky against her skin. She could hear the murmurs from the Gala hall behind her, the buzz of shock and scandal spreading like wildfire. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to march back in there and tell every single person exactly what they were. Complicit. Cowards. People who'd rather protect their comfort than stand up for what was right. But she didn't have time for that. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out with trembling fingers and saw a text from her assistant, Jordan, who'd been coordinating backstage for the awards ceremony. Jordan. "Michaela, I just heard what happened. Are you okay? Do you need me to come find you?" Michaela typed back quickly. "I'm fine. Is everything ready for the ceremony?" Jordan. "Yes, but are you sure you want to go through with it after what just happened?" Michaela stared at the message. Every part of her body screamed to leave, to walk out of this building, go home, and never look back. To let people like Richard Caldwell win, because fighting him, standing up, making a scene, it always came at a cost. It always hurt. But then she thought about the young server who'd been standing there when Richard threw that wine, the look of horror and helplessness on her face. She thought about every black woman who had ever been dismissed, humiliated, or erased in spaces like this. And she thought about the empire she'd built, not for herself, but for them. "Michaela, I'll be there in 5 minutes." She cleaned herself up as best she could, though the stain was impossible to hide. She fixed her hair, reapplied her lipstick, and took one long, steadying breath. Then she walked back into the hall. The crowd parted as she moved through it. She could feel their eyes on her, some pitying, some uncomfortable, some curious. Richard Caldwell was still near the bar, laughing with his friends as if nothing had happened. Michaela didn't look at him. She made her way to the front of the room where the stage was set up for the awards ceremony. The MC, a polished woman in her 50s, was already at the microphone preparing to introduce the next segment. As Michaela approached, The MC's eyes widened. She glanced down at the stain on Michaela's dress, then back up at her face, clearly unsure what to do. Michaela gave her a small, reassuring nod. The MC cleared her throat and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to present our Emerging Visionary Award. This honor recognizes an individual who has demonstrated exceptional innovation, leadership, and impact in their industry. This year's recipient has redefined what it means to build a business with integrity, vision, and purpose." The room quieted. A spotlight swung toward the stage. "Please join me in welcoming the CEO and founder of Grant Hospitality Group, Michaela Grant." The applause was polite but scattered. Some people clapped enthusiastically, others hesitated, glancing toward Richard Caldwell to gauge his reaction. Michaela climbed the stairs to the stage, her stained dress on full display under the lights. She accepted the crystal award from the MC and stepped up to the microphone. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting every person in that room feel the weight of what happened. Then she spoke. "When I was invited to receive this award, I was told it was for my contributions to the hospitality industry. But standing here tonight, I realized that what I've really been contributing to is a system that wasn't built for people like me." The room went still. "I've spent my entire career proving that I belong, proving that I'm smart enough, capable enough, worthy enough to sit at tables like this. And no matter how much I achieve, there will always be people," she paused, her eyes flicking briefly toward Richard, "who see me and decide, before I've even spoken, that I don't." The tension in the room was unbearable. "Tonight, someone threw wine at me because he assumed I was the help. He humiliated me in front of all of you, and not one person said a word." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. Cameras were out now, recording everything. Michaela's voice grew stronger. "But here's the thing. I didn't come here for your approval. I built my company without it. I'll continue to thrive without it. And to the man who thought he could break me tonight," he looked directly at Richard. His smug smile had vanished. "You should know that Grant Hospitality Group just finalized the acquisition of the Sterling Hall. This venue, the one you've been coming to for 40 years. The room erupted. Richard's face went white. Michaela held up the award, her voice cutting through the chaos. "As of Monday morning, I'm your landlord, and I think it's time we had a conversation about respect."
The aftermath was seismic. Within hours, video footage of the wine-throwing incident had spread across social media. News outlets picked it up. Billionaire humiliates black CEO at Gala, then discovers she owns the venue, became a trending headline. Richard Caldwell's name was dragged through every platform, his reputation shredded. The foundation that hosted the gala issued a public apology and announced they would be reviewing their vetting process for attendees. Several businesses quietly distanced themselves from Richard. Investors pulled out of his projects. His own children reportedly refused to speak to him. As for Michaela, she became a symbol. She received thousands of messages from people, especially black women, thanking her for standing up, for not shrinking, for showing the world what resilience looked like. She was invited to speak at conferences, featured in major publications, and offered partnerships she'd never imagined. But the most meaningful moment came a week later. Michaela was at the Sterling Hall, overseeing renovations she'd planned for the space, when she saw a familiar face, the young black server who'd been there the night of the gala. The woman approached hesitantly. "Miss Grant? I wanted to thank you for what you did. I've been working events like that for 3 years, and I can't tell you how many times I've been treated like I'm invisible. Watching you stand up there and say what you said, it meant everything to me." Michaela smiled, her eyes soft. "What's your name?" Simone. Simone, how would you feel about working for Grant Hospitality? I could use someone with your experience in event management, and I promise you, at my company, you'll never be invisible. Simone's eyes filled with tears. Are you serious? Completely. They shook hands, and in that moment, Michaela understood something she'd always known but never felt so deeply. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd been overlooked, dismissed, or humiliated because of who they were. Later that evening, Michaela sat in her office, the Crystal Award on her desk, and thought about Richard Caldwell. She wondered if he'd learned anything, if he felt remorse, if he understood the damage he'd caused, not just to her, but to every person he'd ever looked down on. Probably not. But that was okay, because this story wasn't about him anymore. It was about a black woman who refused to be broken, who turned humiliation into power, who built something beautiful out of every obstacle thrown in her path. And it was about all of us, everyone watching, listening, witnessing, making a choice. Will we stay silent when we see injustice? Or will we speak up, stand up, and refuse to let cruelty go unchallenged? Because the truth is, rooms like that gala are full of Richard Caldwells, people who believe their wealth, their legacy, their skin color gives them the right to diminish others. But they're also full of Michaela Grants, people who refuse to shrink, who build empires not in spite of the obstacles, but because of them.